Hey guys, welcome to Actualol. A year ago, I went to Spiel 2016, a massive board game convention in Essen, Germany. Had an amazing time and I picked up a whole bunch of games and I did a whole video about it. So now I wanted to go back after a year and talk about the games that I picked up, whether I still like them, whether they're still in my collection, and also talk about some other games that I have played since Essen but came out at last year's Essen. This video wouldn't exist without my Patreon backers. Thank you so much to them. If you want to help make Actualol grow bigger and better, then head over to patreon.com/Actualol. Right, let's get to it. So first, I'm going to talk about the games that I've played since Essen that I didn't pick up at the time. Starting with Junkart. This is a great stacking dexterity game, beautiful colors, all wooden pieces, and it comes with 10 different games in the box. So there's loads and loads of different ways to play it, and I really enjoyed all of them. I honestly think that Junkart might be my favorite dexterity game of all time, so it's an absolute keeper for me, and I covered it in my top 10 Christmas gifts video. Nimmt is a filler card game that's based on Nimmt, which is a classic game that's been around for many years. And in Nimmt, you've got a hand of cards, they're all numbers. You're trying to play them at the right time so you don't get penalized and have to pick up cards as a penalty. Nimmt is very similar to that, but it only plays 2 to 4 players and it has a bit more strategy. There's a bit more to think about, and because there's less players, there's a bit more control. So it's a more interesting game. If you perhaps didn't like Nimmt because you felt it was too random, then Nimmt probably takes care of that a little bit, and it also just means that you can play a similar feel but with a smaller group. So I really like it. It's a nice filler game. I mean, I haven't played it loads. Kingdomino is, well, that won the Spiel des Jahres this year. So this is a game from Bruno Catala, and it's a tile placement game. You're playing with these dominoes, and there's different regions of kingdoms, and you're trying to connect up and create these big regions to score the most points. It's really, really simple. It's almost lighter than a gateway game. It's very, very easy to get into. And I've enjoyed it, but for that reason, I'm not 100% sure that it's going to stick around forever. Now, I have heard that there's Queendomino coming out this year, and that takes the similar system but gives you a bit more to think about. So I'm excited about Queendomino. I feel like that might be the right level for me, because Kingdomino is just a little bit too, it's just not exciting enough. Like, I've enjoyed the time I've played it, but I'm not racing to play it again. But the system is very clever, the way that you select the dominoes and the way that they fit together. It's also really beautiful. So I'm hoping that Queendomino might supplant Kingdomino in my collection. Codenames Pictures. That was my #1 top 10 Christmas gifts game for last year. It's Codenames, but with pictures. I really enjoy it. I'm not sure if I prefer words or pictures. I like playing both. So I would highly recommend that game. Dodolido is a small card game from Jacques Zemet, who has made Ghost Blitz, Tarantula Tango, Cockroach Poker. All of these games, well, most of them in this line from Dry Magia Spiele. And they are great kids, family games, also great drinking games, nice small boxes, and they tend to be sort of speed games or reaction games. You're having to think on your feet. I really like them. Dodolido is another great one of them, possibly one of the harder ones. Yeah, so I really enjoy that game. Mask of Anubis is a game that sold out almost immediately at Essen last year. This was from a Japan brand, and the reason it's sold out is because it's this really interesting game that comes with a VR headset. So you use your phone, it just slots in, so that it comes with an app. One person for a minute is put into this Egyptian temple, and they have to work out where they are and communicate the information, everything that they see, back to the other players. Everyone's playing cooperatively, and then they have cardboard pieces, and they're trying to create this maze. And then the next person has their turn. They're put somewhere else in the maze. They have to give their perspective. And so you're having to use, everyone's got a little piece of the puzzle, but can they communicate it effectively and within a minute? And then can you create the maze perfectly so that eventually the game will effectively run you through that maze and get to the end point? It's a really cool game. It's completely different to anything else. And I love it. The only reason it's not here is because my friend's borrowing it. I feel like it could be improved for sure, but it does something completely different. It's using technology in a really interesting way, but still having a brilliant cooperative experience. And now they've brought out Mask of Moai, both of which I want to cover in a future video. Mask of Moai is just almost an update with a slightly different gameplay, but still using a headset. Picassimo is a great drawing game. I've done a review of this. You all have a drawing board. You're all given a word. You're drawing simultaneously, so it's got a nice pace to it. And then they have puzzle pieces. So the game forces you to effectively rearrange your drawing so it looks like this crazy Picasso painting. And then people have to guess what it is. So you have drawn a lovely horse, but it gets rearranged. Can they still tell it's a horse? It's a fun party game. I really like drawing games. This has just worked every time I've played it. Plays up to 6. Yeah, check out my review, but really like that. Definitely keeping that. Schotten Totten is a 2-player card game from Yellow. This is a Reiner Knizia game. I think it's like 20 years old. And Battle Line was also very similar. Battle Line was in my top 10 couples games. This is very, very similar. It's very slightly different amounts of cards. But it's a great game where you're head-to-head. You've got these different posts that you're trying to win, and you are playing cards on them, and you're having to create these poker-like hands. So can you get like a 3 of a kind or a run, things like that. And it's about trying to win the most posts against your competitor. Check out my top 10 couples games to see Battle Line. This is basically like that, but with nicer artwork. So definitely keeping that, and I've since got rid of Battle Line. HMS Dolores is a prisoner's dilemma game where you are competing with a neighbor over a set of cards. You're splitting loot, and you have to decide, are you going to truce? Are you going to fight each other? And so there's a real mental aspect to the game, and there's some negotiation. I've reviewed that one, really like it. That's staying in my collection. Captain Sonar, that is a big hit of a game. This is a big group game, best with 6 or 8 players. You're both playing it's a team game. You're playing rival submarines, and you're trying to move your submarine around, find the opponent's submarine, and destroy it. It's a really great game, and definitely keeping this one. And I really need to talk about it properly in a video. I definitely aim to. Rhyme the Rap Challenge is a party game that's going to be kickstarted. They demoed it last year at Essen, and it's a fun party game where you're given certain words and you have to, against the clock, come up with a rap. You're all writing a rap and then you perform them. And I like creative games like that, and it just worked really nicely. Goths Save the Queen is a card game, very small box card game from Sit Down Games, who made Magic Maze. And this is a team game. You play 2 versus 2, and it's a game of communication or trying to read your partner, because one of you is the king and they will make certain decisions. One of you is the war master and they will carry out your decisions, but only if you've sort of read each other's mind. You're trying to attack the other team, and it's all about how well you can interpret what you think your teammate's going to do. And it plays nicely. It's quite a short game, and it's just got a slightly different feel to any other game that I have. So for now, I've kept it. I wouldn't say it blows me away, but I have really enjoyed it. Hit Z Road is a game that I've reviewed on the channel. This is a zombie game with dice where you're trying to survive, and I didn't especially take to it. It's got wonderful artwork, but I didn't care that I was doing an auction in relation to a zombie apocalypse, and I also felt that the game was brutal for beginners, so just didn't really take to that one. And then finally, Pandemic Iberia. Well, this is a great co-op game. I love Pandemic, and Pandemic Iberia just takes basic Pandemic, puts it in olden times, and has a bit more theme to it because you're having to build railways and you're having to purify water. And because it adds those railways and a few extra mechanisms, it makes it a slightly more interesting game than Pandemic. I still love normal Pandemic. Pandemic Iberia, it gives you new challenges, and I really enjoyed that. So those are the games that I picked up since. Now I'm going to talk through the games that I covered in my last video and whether I kept them or not. So starting with Mondrian. This is a dexterity game where there's a grid of cards that look like Mondrian art, and you're rolling, throwing, dropping dice on them to try and win them. I enjoyed this. I've still got it in my collection. I don't know that it's my favorite dexterity game. I'm not even sure if it would go into my top 5 or top 10. I do like dexterity games. I need to play this one a bit more. It's definitely immediate fun, and it's got a bit of thinkiness to it. There might be similar games out there that I haven't tried that I might prefer. But still a really cool game and a relatively small box. Fold It was an interesting Korean game where everyone has a tiny bit of cloth that has a bunch of meals printed on it. And then you flip over a card and you're racing to fold the cloth in such a way that it only shows the meals that are shown on this card. A very interesting idea, and I was super excited about it, but I played it a few times. I didn't see the longevity with it. I didn't even especially enjoy it when I played it. There was a heavy puzzle aspect to the harder cards where you could really struggle to know how to fold the cloth, and so that just got a bit frustrating. For whatever reason, it wasn't enough for me in a fairly big box, so I got rid of Fold It quite quickly. Spaghetti is a dexterity game. This is very much a kids-friendly thing. You've got a bunch of shoelaces all tangled up and these ping pong balls that represent meatballs, and they're on a cardboard plate, and against a timer you have to pull out spaghetti carefully, because if the meatballs fall off the plate or if the spaghetti falls off the plate, your time's up and you have to stop. So you're trying to collect spaghetti, and that's going to give you points, and the longer the spaghetti, the more points. It works really nicely as a system. I love that you're playing against a timer. It puts that pressure on. It doesn't necessarily have like the legs of some dexterity games, but I think it's fun, it's quick, it's silly. I've still got it for now. I love the artwork, but it's probably better for someone with kids. I don't know how many of my adult friends wanna play it all the time, but I've got it for now. Pick a Pig and Pick a Dog were card games. I keep saying were, this is giving away. I got rid of them ultimately. These are card games, again for kids. You've got a bunch of cute drawings laid out on the table, all cards, and you're trying to create a connection. You're picking up cards quickly that are one move away or exactly the same as the card that you have in your hand. So you're trying to spot the differences between all these cards. It plays nicely, but it didn't have enough to want to keep playing it. I felt like I got loads of other games that operate on a similar level. Also had a fair amount of setup. So yeah, it wasn't quite enough for me. Gamsh Alpin was a tiny little card game where you are playing with a teammate and you're trying to collect sets of cards. Like you're trying to get a full set of cards and then secretly communicate to your teammate that you've got that set, and then they have to declare something. And this game added some extra elements. I've actually only played it once or twice, and I didn't get to add those extra elements yet. So I've still got it, but mostly because it's a tiny box card game. But I haven't yet got around to playing it enough to really decide whether I want to keep it forever. Spoilers was a bluffing game that used plots from really obscure B-movies, and the other players had to decide which one was real, and you could bluff about it. I like the idea of it, the using the movies. It wasn't trivia, but it kind of taught you some stuff about how weird B-movies are. But I just felt the bluffing aspect didn't really work strong enough for me, so I didn't keep Spoilers. Capital was a game that I did really enjoy, and I've reviewed. This is from Grana and the designer of CV, which is a game that I really love. Capital is about building districts in the city of Warsaw. It's a really nice tile placement game. You're drafting the tiles, you're passing them around in the hand, you're having to pay for them, and then the way they rotate, you're creating these little districts, and you really want this wonderful array of everything. The more you can have in your city with commercial and industrial and residential and culture, all these different things. And then there's a few tiles that you can compete over that give you certain ways to score points and create. There's a surprising amount of depth in this game. I really like the theme of it. I like the tile artwork. but it's really simple to get into. I would say it's on the level of Carcassonne, possibly even easier to teach than Carcassonne. I think it's a great tile placement game. I think if you like city building games, you absolutely have to check it out. If you're looking for a tile placement game or a gateway game, I really enjoy it. It's definitely staying in my collection for a long time. That is Capital. Cottage Garden was another game that I've reviewed. This was from Uwe Rosenberg, and it's very similar to his game Patchwork, where you've got these Tetris-style polyominoes, and you are placing them onto a board, and you're effectively puzzling them around their awkward shapes, and you have to create these flower beds. It's got some lovely artwork. It was not as appealing to me as Patchwork, even though it plays to 4 players. I felt that it's a really nice game to play with your parents who perhaps aren't gamers. The rules are really simple, and it's got a sort of accessible theme for them. Ultimately, I didn't keep it, but I am interested to try his next game in this line called Indian Summer. That's coming out of this Essen, because I was close to keeping Cottage Garden. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't exciting enough for me in the way that I feel that Patchwork is. So I'm hoping the Indian Summer does something different. Cottage Garden, still a great game. I can see it working for some people. I just felt like it didn't quite deserve the place in my collection. Gentleman's Deal was a negotiation game. This is a card game, and it required, it was sort of better with higher player counts. So we were talking like 6 to 11 players. Every round, one person is divvying up some money. So they are being told how much money they've got. They can bluff a little bit. They decide to apportion it amongst everyone, and then the other players vote on whether they want to see that pass or whether they want to see it fail. And so there's a lot of negotiation about who should get the most money, and there's also some player roles that you can compete over, and they create interesting situations. I enjoyed it. Made a lot of people angry, this game. It was quite a aggressive negotiation game, or at least some of the people that I played it with. And there's another game on this list that I slightly preferred that I kept instead. So I didn't keep Gentleman's Deal. I don't think it's bad at all, but it's hard to get a negotiation game that works best with sort of, let's say, 8 players to the table regularly. And it wasn't quite enough for me. Right, Unusual Suspects expansion, Burn After Reading. This was just an expansion to a game that I really love, a game that I put in my top 10 Christmas gifts game. It's effectively Guess Who, but more judgmental. I really enjoy that game, and the expansion just adds more pictures and more questions, so it's a winner. Raise Your Goblets was a game that I was really excited about. It was my number 3 game in my most anticipated Essen games. Unfortunately, it was a big disappointment for me. It came with these plastic goblets. The idea was great. You're all at a feast and you're poisoning each other and you're rotating the cups and you have to try and kill someone. But it was so chaotic. I talk about it more in my review, but it was so hard to keep a track of anything. Once the novelty had passed, there wasn't enough of a game there to keep playing it. And I was such a shame because I love the theme and I love the production of it. And the artwork, everything except the game, unfortunately. Holmes, Sherlock and Mycroft. This is a 2-player game. You're trying to collect sets of clues. There's a bunch of different cards of different numbers, and you're trying to race to get the most evidence in certain sets. So whilst the theme is Sherlock Holmes, I don't think the theme is there really at all. And then you're using the different characters of Sherlock Holmes to help you. There's a currency, which are these magnifying glasses. And I didn't dislike this game. I just felt like I had a lot of 2-player games that are better than it. It didn't have a whole amount of tension for me. I felt like the games always were... They always end quite close, which I guess is a good thing, but I didn't really feel that my decisions were that exciting. And because you're not blocking each other on where you use, there wasn't that kind of dynamic that you would get with a traditional worker placement game. Yeah, it was okay, but not enough to keep. Mission Impractical was a party game where there's a grid of different crazy items that you might use, and then there's 4 missions. Some of them are a bit outlandish, some of them are a bit normal. Things like proposing to someone, I think, or rescuing someone from an aeroplane, something like that. and one person is having to decide which out of these grid of items, like a toothpick and a paper clip, things like that, which are they going to use to complete the mission they've been assigned. Everyone else then has to guess which mission they pick based on the items that they used, and they also tell a story about how they would do it. So I really like that aspect of it, where there's a creative aspect and you're making each other laugh. And I feel like the game isn't perfect, but because of that, I've kept it for now. I felt like there was too much opportunity for people to tell the same stories. It's almost there, and I think with some house rules it could be better. So I've kept it for now. Las Vegas, the card game, is based on a game that I love called Las Vegas. I've also reviewed Las Vegas, the card game, and this was a much smaller box, and instead of rolling dice like in the original game, you're using cards that have dice on them. It works in a similar way. It's possibly even more strategic, but I just prefer the dice. The dice are more exciting. They create just better moments for the game, and the tiny cards are really fiddly. So I think it's perfectly fine game, but I didn't keep it because I've got Las Vegas and I don't need both. 7 Ronin is a 2-player game. It's an asymmetrical 2-player game. One person is trying to defend this village with the 7 Ronin, and another person are these evil ninjas that are attacking the village. You have a shield each, and each round you're picking which locations in this village you're going to attack or defend. There's quite a lot going on for this simple and relatively short 2-player game, because each location has a different special ability that you can use. There's a lot to think about. I just didn't find it interesting enough. A tiny bit fiddly that you're constantly having to go back and forth between looking at the map and reading what each special ability was. And it's the same with the Ronin. The defenders of the village, they all have a special ability, but it's not written on their card. And things like that just really bog down what should be a simple 2-player game. Ultimately, I don't think that was the problem. I didn't dislike the game, but just like with Holmes and Mycroft, I felt like there were better ones out there for 2 players. When I Dream is a party game that I love. This is easily my favourite game from Essen last year. This is a game where one person wears a blindfold for a round, everyone else is flipping over cards that have words on them, and then they take it in turns to each say a word to try and get that person to guess the word that's on the card. Except you have hidden roles. Some players are fairies and they are trying to help the dreamer. Other players are imps and they are trying to throw the dreamer off, so they are giving them bad words. Some players are tricksters and they want a balance between success and failure. And it's just a really interesting game. I've reviewed it. Go and check out my review. But this is a brilliant game. And it's been really hard to get hold of for a year. But it's coming out properly this year at Essen from Repros Production. And I believe it's got even more cards in it. So I'm absolutely so excited to get an even bigger and better version of When I Dream. Brilliant party game. Top Dance, Just Dance is a very silly game where one person has a card. They're being told to do a certain dance move that is shown on the card, and everyone else is watching them, and then there's a bunch of cards in the middle that show all the potential dances it could be, and they have to shout out the number to guess the dance. It's silly and simple. I've only played it once. I enjoyed it. It's certainly not for everyone, but I think it'd be great for kids, and I think it's good for that kind of silly party where you might want to play something like this, so I've kept it for now. Gooseberry was a game that I was really excited to find. This was self-published by the designer of Coup, Ricky Tata. This is a party game similar to Spyfall. There's a grid of words in the center. Imagine countries, and one person is the gooseberry and they don't know the word that everyone else knows. Then you all have to say a word related to that word. Take it in turns to say that word, but you don't want to give it away too much because then the gooseberry will find out the word that everyone's talking about. But you want to give it away a little bit because you need your other players to know that you're not the gooseberry. Since been reprinted as the Chameleon from Big Potato Games, It's much nicer now. It's in a proper box and it's got loads and loads of grids of words, and it's just a really simple, great party game. I really enjoy it, and so I'm glad to have the Chameleon now. Checkpoint Charlie is a game that I've done a review of. It has this wonderful artwork, and you are trying to work out who is the suspect cat. Everyone's got these different rules that whether the cat wears a hat or not, whether he's wearing a jacket or not, whether he's holding a newspaper, and you know one of these rules, and then everyone is taking cards and placing them either side of their hidden rules. So you're trying to understand what everyone else knows to ultimately determine who the exact cat is. And then there's a speed aspect of trying to work it out the quickest. It was a fun game. I didn't mind it, but I just didn't keep it. It wasn't interesting enough. The Game of 49 is a light auction game where you're competing over spots on this grid in the middle. So a lot will be called, it's a number, and that refers to something on this grid. And you're trying to win spots on this grid because they make you money back, so it allows you to do more bidding, but ultimately you're trying to create a row of 4, so it's connect 4. And so you're fighting over spots because you might want a spot because it's good for your diagonal, but somebody else wants it for their line that's across. And I enjoyed this game the first couple of times, and then I felt like there was a bit too much luck. It was to do with when the lots were being called, and there was also a real demand on people outbidding. You know, somebody's getting close to winning, so you're forced to outbid them and waste all your money just to stop them from winning, but then of course you have no money to win yourself, and that just felt unsatisfying. I think it was so close to me really enjoying it and being a classic, sort of very simple auction game, but as it is, I prefer a game like High Society, which doesn't have any so much issues for me. So that's the Game of 49. Best Treehouse Ever is got great cute artwork. It's a simple card game. You're drafting cards a bit like Sushi Go, and you're trying to build a tree house. The reason I didn't keep this game was because I felt like the theme of it didn't really come through. The artwork's lovely, but really you're just competing for colored cards. And then the way you score points, where you deny certain categories to score, or you make other categories score more, it just didn't feel like it fit the level of the game. It felt, I wouldn't say mean, but sort of unsatisfying. And I just much prefer Sushi Go or Dream Home, which is a game about building a dream home. I just realized that I didn't talk about Dream Home before, so very quickly, Dream Home was a game that came out at Essen that I really liked. It's a very simple family level game where you are building a dream home, you're building rooms, you're trying to make them bigger, but you're competing over the cards that you can get, and there's different placement rules. I think it's really simple and easy to get into. I love the theme of it, and the artwork's amazing. I haven't played it loads because it's kind of one that I would keep as a gateway game, but they are bringing out an expansion at Essen this year, and I'm hoping that makes the game a little bit more interesting, give it a bit more replayability, so I don't just keep it for those times, I can play it other times as well. So that's Dream Home. Right, Avenue was a game that I picked up, and I love Avenue. I've also reviewed this one. This is a roll and write type of game, if you know what that is, but in fact, you're not rolling in this game, you're drawing cards. Everyone's got a paper map that you are trying to connect up these vineyards, and so one round you're trying to connect grapes to a specific vineyard on the map. Everyone's going off the same deck of cards where you draw these different routes, so it might be a turning or a straight line vertically or horizontally, and everyone then has to draw that somewhere on their map, but it's where you draw it will differentiate you and get you different points from the other players. It's really quick because you're playing simultaneously, and it's got real decisions to it. I really enjoy it. It's being re-released now as Kokoro, Avenue of the Kodama, with even better production. So I'm really excited for that. I would highly recommend Avenue. Sherlock 13 was a very simple deduction game where you've each got a bit of paper, you're marking off suspects, There's only 13 potential suspects. You're trying to work out who the killer is, and you're getting information by asking other players questions. This one didn't work for me at all. I felt like everyone found out the same info at the same time because all the questions were public, and so everyone was getting all of the same information, and so it became this weird thing where we all just found out who the killer was in exactly the same round, and so it was really just whose turn it was to make that accusation, and everyone else behind them would have made the accusation on their turn, but it was this other person's turn. Maybe there's a way to play around that. We played it a few times, it fell flat, I had no interest in going back to it. Twins was a game from Oik Games, came in a very cute box and some lovely artwork. This was a Reiner Knizia game that had been reprinted. The rulebook was terrible. I can't even fully remember how this game played, but we played it 2 or 3 times. I didn't see anything really there, and which makes sense because it's got a pretty average rating on Board Game Geek. I'm not sure why they reprinted this one. The fancy artwork wasn't enough, so got rid of that one pretty quick. Karibou Camp is a game that I reviewed. This is a kids family game, very similar to Gamsh Alpin that I was talking about, but with some differences where you're trying to collect sets, you've got a partner, and you have to secretly communicate to them. But in this game, instead of just having one secret code, the game gives you certain codes. So you might pull on your ear or touch your nose or wink. And I really like that because it gives different things, and then that gives information to the other players. It's not a game that I've played loads since. I hope to play it again. I don't think it was perfect, but I think I really like that secret communication. It really makes the game. 1001 was a board game with an Aladdin theme where you are flying around on a magic carpet and you're playing in teams, and you are picking secretly where Aladdin's going to move on this map. The winds are going to blow him in a direction, and you're going to collect gems to get points. The other team are trying to guess which direction you go in, because if they get it right, they're going to get points off of you, or potentially stop you from moving altogether. Had some really interesting ideas. I like that team aspect, and I like having to outguess the other team because there's always an obvious route, but are you going to take the obvious route? Or you know that they're going to pick that, so you might go for a less obvious route that gets you less gems, but at least you won't get stopped doing it. There wasn't enough of a game outside of that. You collect gems and then just spend them you basically trade them in for points. London Dread is a cooperative programming real-time game set in London. It's got a sort of dark horror theme to it. It's like a Victorian London thing. And this game had a really cool programming phase where you're against a timer and you're trying to work out where you can go on the map to solve issues, and your teammates are having to coordinate with you because you want to do everything efficiently, and there's just not enough time to do everything. I really like that aspect of it, but there was a lot of bulk to the game. I didn't feel like the theme or the story came through as much as I would like. I've actually filmed a review for this that I'm going to release soon, so you can check that out. I think it's not a bad game, but it wasn't enough to stay in my collection. Glimpse is similar to Unusual Suspects. You're playing on a team and you're trying to get your teammate to guess somebody from this lineup of faces. They don't know which faces are yours because they are looking at the board with coloured glasses, so they can't see any colour. So it's got this idea that the game is colourblind. I actually found the game to play more on stereotypes than Unusual Suspects, because it was, rather than asking you questions like Unusual Suspects does, generally quite banal questions like, do they ride a bike? This one was saying, how do you get across to this person by saying their favourite food? And the artwork, there wasn't much to go on them other than their ethnicity sometimes, or potentially their age. And so you, like, if you want to win, you're being forced to say things that, well, you're not being forced to, but that was effectively often the only way to get across who they were because there was no other character to the cards. Yeah, I didn't like this game at all, really, and so I got rid of that. Celestia is a great push your luck game where you're all on this airship. The captain is rolled some dice. There's going to be some malfunctions on the ship. Can they deal with it? They can then bluff about whether they can deal with it. The other players have to decide, are they going to get off the ship or are they going to stay on because then they want to go further into the clouds and make more points. Really great push your luck game with some bluffing. This was in my top 10 Christmas gifts. Highly, highly recommend it. Love it. And same goes for the expansion. It's a tiny little box expansion. Add some really interesting things to the game where other players can help the captain. And there's a few more special ability cards. Yeah, definitely recommend that expansion as well. That's called A Little Help. Was a party game where you have something that you're trying to get other people to guess. So let's say it's a movie or a celebrity, but you want as few people as possible to guess it, as long as one person gets it. So let's say you're playing with 8 players, you're going to get the most points if only one person out of that 8 get it. You're going to get slightly less for 2, slightly less for 3, and if any more than 3 get it, you've failed, you get no points. Really interesting concept because you're giving these really tentative clues and you've got like I think there's like a minute to give them, and you're sort of slowly eking out information, and then players will go, I've got it, but sometimes they don't have it. It's not as chaotic as a Time's Up game. There's a bit more thought to it. I like that challenge. I think it works really well, and I'm sad to see, I think they did a Kickstarter and it didn't fund. I'm not sure where this game has ended up, but I think it's a really great party game, and I'm definitely keeping this one. Bang the Dice Game, the Old Saloon, is an expansion for Bang the Dice Game. And Bang the Dice Game is a hidden role game with a Western theme where you're playing outlaws, sheriffs, or renegades, and you're trying to attack the people that are not on your team. You're trying to effectively win. You're doing that by rolling dice, and you get to re-roll them a bit like King of Tokyo, and you're using them to attack other players. But are you bluffing and attacking people that are not on your team? Are you attacking the people that you need to attack? And you're trying to kind of be the last man standing. Old Saloon adds more cool stuff to that game. So if you like Bang the Dice Game, I would definitely get Old Saloon. It adds more rolls, adds these interesting dice. Some are more aggressive but riskier, some are more defensive. There's just a few extra things that it adds. I think they're all interesting. I'm not 100% sure that I want to keep Bang the Dice Game long term. There's a lot of hidden role games out there. I felt like it hasn't always played brilliantly for me, so I need to give it a few more plays, but for now I've kept the expansion. TIEFE TASCHEN is a game that I've done a review of. This is a great party-style negotiation game. I was talking about Gentleman's Deal earlier. This one is the game that I think is a bit better. One person is divvying up money, they're a politician. Everyone else has to vote on whether they should stay in and whether they are fair in their giving out of money. But you're also secretly picking an action card each turn. So either you're voting, maybe you're trying to extort more money, maybe you're trying to steal from other players, maybe the other players are blocking you. Really cool game in such a small box. I hope to see this one reprinted by a bigger publisher. That's TIEFE TASCHEN. Rainbow Rage is a speed reaction game. I've also reviewed this one. This is like, imagine Ghost Blitz or Jungle Speed. I feel like it's slightly easier to get into, certainly, than Ghost Blitz. You flip over a rainbow, 2 of the colors are not in the right place. You have to grab one of those colors. So there's an opportunity for 2 people to score each round. So that's nice. And you're trying to then collect the colors and make a rainbow in the ones that you've picked. There's also ways to make the game harder, but it's already hard enough as it is. And I've kept that one because I think it's it's nice for that level of game if you want that kind of speed reaction game. Sixes is a party game that I've played a lot of. It's very unassuming. I also have reviewed this one. You get a list of categories, and in one round you're trying to match with every other player in the game. So for example, you might say types of cheese or maybe a football team. Everyone else has to write something down, but you're trying to write an answer that everyone else has. Then in the other rounds, you're trying to do the opposite. You're trying to write unique answers. So you maybe write a type of cheese, but it has to be obscure so that nobody else writes it. Of course, everyone else is writing obscure stuff, so they might match with you and then you don't get points. it's just a very simple idea. It's very kind of classic mass market kind of Christmas game, I think. But it works great, it plays quickly, and it's a tiny box, so definitely keeping 6s. Insider is a game from Oink Games. This was one of my most anticipated games last year. And this is 20 questions with a hidden role. So one person knows a specific word, and everyone else is asking them yes or no questions to try and find out, to try and ultimately guess that word. But one other player secretly knows the word, and they are trying to get everyone to guess the word. So they're trying to help them along with their questions, but then they don't want to be caught at the end. They don't want to be found out as the insider. It's a fun game. We played it quite a lot at Essen. You can play it in like 3 minutes. I think it's a really cool game, and for such a small box. But since a game called Werewords has come out, and that's a very similar idea, but it adds a few more things. It creates one person that wants you to guess the word, and it has a werewolf that doesn't want you to guess the word, and you're ultimately trying to find who the werewolf is in this game. I think Werewords does it slightly better, gives you options of the words in case people don't know what they are. It comes with an app that helps you kind of do the opening your eyes and all that stuff. So I've kept Insider because it's such a small box, but I feel like Werewords does it all a bit better. And then finally, Billionaire Banshee. This is a party game where one person has to decide, are they going to date the person that the game presents? So they're given a perk, something weird and obscure like they have X-ray vision maybe, and a quirk, which is going to be something bad like their breath always smells of mayonnaise. And everyone else then has to vote, and I think you're supposed to give a reason as to why you voted either way. I found that this game, when we first played it, is kind of funny because the cards are very cleverly written, and they've also got these little details, these explanations of how the rules work. So, for example, maybe the mayonnaise breath, they can't brush their teeth or something. There's no way to fix it. Things like that. And that, when you first read them, that's funny. But that's not the game making you laugh. That's just the guy who wrote the cards. And he's done a great job of it. But I don't think there's enough of a game here, because so often you have a perk and a quirk that just don't match at all. That the person either doesn't care about the perk, like it's like, oh, you're dating a wrestler, like who cares? And then the quirk is so bad that everyone votes the same way. And it happens the opposite way around, where the perk is really good and the quirk is not that bad. And so, yeah, you might laugh a bit, but there's no decisions there, and then there's no real argument to be had there. So the idea of a game like this might be that you're arguing about the kind of person you would date. And this game doesn't provide that, because the cards are so outlandish. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend this one at all, I'm afraid. That's Billionaire Banshee. So that is the last of the games that I picked up at Essen last year. And just to go through them, I have kept 19 out of 37. So in my video that I did last year, I picked up 37 games. I've kept 19 of them. I feel like there are others that are still to leave. They're not going to stay in the collection forever, but there's definitely a few that are long-term keepers. Along with all of these, I'm going to keep most of these for certainly Captain Sonar, Codenames Pictures, Picassimo, Dream Home, Schotten Totten, and Dodolido. So I apologize for the long video. Thank you for listening to me talk through all the games that I have played that were from last year's Essen, and the ones that I've kept and the ones that didn't work for me. I'm super excited to be going to Essen again this year, and I'm going to be making a video about the games that I'm excited about, so look out for that. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, head over to patreon.com/Actualol. I've also put a link to, well, I think I'm going to put a link to all of the games in the description of this video. There is a lot of links to be putting in there. So if you want to buy any of the games, you're going to help me out because I get a small cut from Amazon. I'm John Perkis. Thank you for watching.